3. Gargoyles getting in the way. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. Henri de Fourcroy binding her, Maya, to bring him back to life, sticking tiny keys on fingertips where they definitely didn't belong. When it was all his own fault, everything that had happened to him. You don't just kidnap small children and drain them of their charm and then go around expecting those children's older sisters to fix you right back up. No. Slow down a bit, said Valko, loping along to keep up with her angry feet. One of the first things Valko had ever told Maya about himself was that his name came from the Bulgarian word for wolf. He wasn't, at first glance, much like a wolf. No big, sharp teeth, no beady yellow eyes, but he certainly could lope. You're not making sense, you know. There's no such thing as Medusan stationery. There can't be. What do you mean, can't? Said Maya, as her bitter feet continued to slap, slap, slap at the sidewalk beneath them. Cabinets can't hold people's mortalities in bottles either, can they? Bronze salamanders can't turn their heads and chat with you. Glass can't melt in your hand and then unmelt again just like that. The whole concept of can't had taken some serious hits over the last month or so, as far as Maya could see. One of Valko's talents was patience, however. He just loped along, trying to wait out her anger and think things through. I mean, a piece of paper can't make you do anything it says. That's just craziness to think it could. Where are we rushing off to right now, anyway? Maya stopped short. They were back in the street where the shadow had come creeping after them, but the whole place looked different now. That edge in the air had faded away. Things felt normal again. The wound-up spring in her chest relaxed a little. I don't know, she said. Anywhere. I just don't like being told I'm trapped, that's all. Valko grinned. Listen to me, then. Not trapped, not trapped, not trapped. There, better? Give that letter to me a second. I'll fix it for you. It was unfairly difficult to stay glum around Valko. Maya fished the envelope back out of her pocket and handed it over. Valko already had his favorite black pen in his hand. He propped the letter against his backpack and made a preparatory flourish in the air. V-O-I-D, he said. That's what we need. Ha! Why hadn't she thought of that? If the paper's super powerful, just make it say something else. But Valko was already staring, a bit puzzled, at the letter he had been scribbling on. He gave his pen a shake and then rummaged through his backpack again, looking for another one. Won't write, he said. Weird. I'm sure it's got ink in it, too. The next pen wouldn't leave a mark either. It skittered right off the page. They tried out the pens on other scraps of paper, and they worked fine. They just couldn't manage to leave a single trace on that inscrutable creamy green letter. The paper wouldn't let itself be torn up, either, even when Valko tried to be extra wolfish about it and use his teeth. Well, never mind, said Valko, rubbing his jaw. So it's stronger than steel, and the ink he used is super special. Who cares? You can still refuse. Just don't do any of those things in the letter. Keep your hands off the embassy wall. Oh, said Maya. She had forgotten the wall. Oh, no. That's how this all started, remember? I already touched that awful wall, just like the letter told me to. Do you think that's what started all the weird stuff happening? Excuse me, said Valko, but I'm pretty sure you hadn't read that letter before you touched anything, right? It's hardly like you were following instructions. And so what, anyway? Touch any wall you want. Does this place look like anything awful happened? Look how normal everything is now. Everything did seem normal. No shadows rustling after them. No more clusters of swaying, singing women. Sometimes you'll be walking along a green ridge in the fog, and the air will catch its breath and the fog will lift just like that, as if fog had never been invented. Maya and Valko were standing on the fogless corner of the Avenue Rap, the broken wall of the Bulgarian embassy off to the left, and the intricate facade of bad old Fourcroy's salamander house to the right, and the air was its normal, unhummy self again. It was enough to make a person feel slightly embarrassed if that person hated to think of herself as overreacting. Maya took a deep breath and walked ahead to take a closer look. The hole in the wall was certainly still there. So, she checked, were the Gargoyles. But the Maya, written in black sand on the pale cement of the sidewalk, had faded to a thin, weathered, friendly gray. You could miss it entirely if you were walking past at a brisk pace, with your eyes not glued to the ground. The mark left on the world by the strangeness was already fading. It was as if this whole part of Paris had been a lump of unbaked bread, and some ill-behaved magical giant had stuck a thumb into the dough. Marks don't last long in bread dough, do they? The dough stretches itself and yawns, and soon even the dings and dents have faded away. There, then. At this rate, everything in the neighborhood might be back to almost normal by evening. So it struck Maya now as rather unreasonable how upset she had felt earlier. "Okay," she said, letting herself relax into another notch's worth of relief. "I won't let a stupid letter boss me around." "That's right," said Valco. "You tell 'em." Once a person starts to stand tall and be brave about one thing, all that courage can slop over into other parts of her being, too. Maya stopped in her tracks and gave Valco the sort of look that someone who has learned how not to drown, even when dumped into very cold water, might give a person. "And there's no way we're going to let you be sent back to Bulgaria," said Maya, with more definiteness than was even remotely reasonable. "You're staying. We'll find a way. It's a plan." "It's clear you've never met my grandmother," said Valco, "but thank you 5,000,000 times over for wanting to rescue me. You are very brave." That was when one of his quick grins rose up and took over his whole face. "And you know what else? It's vacation. Liberty for all." 10 whole days without school. The wind was chilly as it curled around their liberated legs, but it was the brisk chill of freedom. They were strolling down the once again ordinary street, and there were 10 days of vacation stretching ahead of them, and the knot in Maya's chest loosened a little more with every step. Soon it would be her birthday, after all. Even far, far, far away from home, birthdays mean something, don't they? "Hey," said Valco, "look where we are. Your favorite old salamander house." The cold air licked her neck when she raised her head. Oh, how had they let their feet bring them here and not even notice? Stone vines twined their way up and down the front of the building, and tangled up in those looping vines were the stone echoes of every kind of creature. Broad ferns and docile cows, bold little people with their hands on jaunty sandstone hips, a woman's sad-eyed face looking down at Maya from above the door. That facade always came as a shock, no matter how many times you had seen it. It was the sort of enchanted cliff that might loom up in front of a person on a jungle path, all of life's secrets crawling and twining and wriggling across it. What was more, for all its stillness, the salamander house had certainly noticed them. Stone eyes everywhere turned like mute spotlights on Maya herself, frozen on the sidewalk stage. Even the door had eyes to stare with, looping webs of iron and glass squinting past a pair of phoenixes at anyone bold enough to come close, reckless enough to let her fingertip drift across the cool bronze head of the salamander door handle. The door clicked and opened. Maya snatched her hand away. What was she doing? "You want to go in?" said Valco. He sounded not shocked, but rather mildly curious, as if wandering into buildings where bad things had happened, and not that long ago, were a perfectly logical and normal thing to do. "Of course not," said Maya. She made her voice extra sharp to get the point across. Her finger was still sort of itching to run itself across the salamander's head again, however. The bronze was so smooth and cold, and she could feel the little patterned ridges above its inscrutable eyes. "Lots of interesting stuff in there still, probably," said Valco. It sounded very convincing when Valco said it. "Some pretty cool items." "Valco," Maya said sternly, "that's where he lived. That's Fourcroy's own house. You know what's in there." Valco more or less laughed, but Maya thought she saw the faintest trace of cloud in his eyes, a few curling tendrils of fog. "Oh, it's so ridiculously obvious," she said. It really was. She couldn't believe they had been walking around a minute ago as if everything were completely normal. "The writing desk. His writing desk, just the number 2 thing the letter wanted us to go find, and here we were about to slide through the door and march right up to it. Sheesh. We weren't going in for any desk, said Valco. We were going to look at all the other neat stuff. The letter thinks it's got us, said Maya. She had to give Valco an impatient tug, away from the iron eyes of that door, away from the watching, waiting head of the salamander. But when she stepped away, the itch at her fingertip flared up for a moment. She stuffed that hand deep into her pocket and frowned. I mean, it almost did have us. And you said letters couldn't boss us around. Ha! All that weird laboratory equipment up there, said Valco with longing. That's it, said Maya. We're leaving. Look at me. I'm leaving. Her feet didn't very much want to go, but she kicked a leg forward and made herself take a step, away, and then the left leg, away. The hand pulling Valco along behind her felt strange, too, for that matter. Was he really that heavy? And the finger on her other hand sat there deep in her pocket and itched and itched. We would need, said Maya, and then stopped to catch her breath and force her leg forward again, a really good reason. Take a breath, move a leg, to go anywhere near, breath, leg, tug on Valco, that desk. They were 10 feet away from the door. It was getting easier to move again. A really, really, really good reason, she said. She was exhausted. Valco blinked and shook his head, his smile slowly coming back as he did so. You know what, Maya, he said. It's too much. You totally need a vacation, I can tell. 20 feet away, maybe more. They were walking like human beings again, not like underwater divers or people stuck in nightmares where the air has turned to sludge. Yes, I do, said Maya. Without shadows, please, and no more letters making me do stuff. So far, nothing's actually made you do anything, said Valco. Just pointing that out. Maya looked at him. You were ready to close your eyes and dive in through that door, she said. Still feel not trapped, not trapped, not trapped? Just because I wanted to do some intelligent exploring. You saw the shadow following us. You felt how weird everything got. But we didn't go in, did we? We walked right on by. We did. All the rest is just, I don't know, us getting sort of hysterical, maybe. Like kids telling each other spooky ghost stories. So there it was. It turns out that there is something quite maddening about the very person who has just been at your side while you were chased through Parisian streets by a shadow and then hypnotized into potentially dangerous behavior by a letter on Snakes for Hair stationery, then insisting that nothing much happened, that it was all in your mind. It put a bad taste in her mouth for the whole rest of that day. The first afternoon of fall vacation, ruined by a shadow, a snake-haired watermark, and a smudge. Really, life was not very fair. That night, Maya lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling and worrying away at the itchy spot on her fingertip. There was something she was supposed to be figuring out, but she was too tired to remember what that was. The letter, the writing desk. The wind had kicked up that evening, and there was enough faint clattering outside her bedroom to make it hard to fall asleep, what with the leftover adrenaline and worry wandering in her veins. The writing desk, the letter. There would have to be a really good reason. But sleep she did, because suddenly it was midnight and she was awake again, sitting straight up in her bed, her heart pounding in her chest, and her ears assaulted by a crashing, grinding, gritty sound. Not faint clattering. No, nothing faint about it. What was that? It was all over so fast. By the time she reached for her lamp, the world had fallen quiet again. Still, it was a while before she could relax enough to think about sleeping. She thought maybe she had been dreaming about a writing desk with an old-fashioned Sphinx statue perched on it, and the writing desk had fallen over with a bang. Pens everywhere. What else was in a writing desk? Pens and stamps and envelopes. She sat back up again. Special ink and writing paper. It had shown all sorts of signs of working, hadn't it, that letter? It had made her want desperately to go into the salamander house, even though she knew that might be, from all sorts of perspectives, a bad idea. And Valco had been pretty much acting like a person under a spell, too, come to think of it, when they were standing in front of that door. So that was what her brain had been trying to tell her all night. Medusan stationery was actually extremely effective stuff. All right. But poisons often had antidotes, right? So, what if a person who had been trapped by magical stationery into doing all sorts of things found more of that stationery and wrote herself an antidote letter? Oh, she was feeling clever now. She even had a pretty clear idea of how that letter should look. Dear Maya, no, you will not do anything to bring that horrible old Fourquois back to life. You may ignore all the commands in the previous letter, no matter what kind of magical paper it was written on. Please have a great vacation and a very happy birthday, and I guarantee that everything from now on will be absolutely A-OK. Love, your friend and self, Maya. It was amazing how much better she felt right away. Worry just up and left her, looking for another home. The sheer and obvious rightness of this plan, of this antidote letter she had just composed so carefully in her head, it was comforting as the warmest, thickest quilt she'd ever snuggled under, on an otherwise cold and windy night. And when she woke up in the morning, she found she was still feeling oddly at peace. The wind had quieted, too. She remembered the dreadful crashing that had startled her in the middle of the night and smiled to herself. Something must have fallen outside or been blown over by the wind. A flower pot on the fire escape, probably. She opened the window to take a look. Old French apartment houses often have quite grand fronts, all carved stone and elaborate window decorations. Maya's building was like that. The Davidsons' living room, which was on the front corner of the building, looked across proudly at an equally grand apartment where a famous writer had once had an even more famous film director over for tea in November 1929. There was a little metal plaque on the wall saying so. But all the building's grandness was saved for the front. The back of the apartment, where the bathrooms and the kitchen and Maya's bedroom were hidden, had windows with the kind of textured, ugly glass that is supposed to let light in while keeping your life private, and those dull-eyed windows looked out at a little courtyard. Not the romantic kind of courtyard with a secret garden and a lovely old hidden tree, either. Nope. This courtyard was all hard-working concrete slabs and trash bins. Usually, then, there was not much to see out of Maya's window, and, to be honest, she hadn't opened it very often to look. But now... Urk! A shock can knock a person right off her feet, it turns out. Before her mind had even gotten as far as words, beaks, claws, wings, Maya's arms had slammed the window shut again, and then her legs gave way under her, and she found herself sitting down very hard on the floor, her mind scrambling about like a crazy thing, trying to put itself together properly. Gargoyles! Somewhere far away the phone was ringing. Feet were hurrying along the hall. Her mother stuck her head in through the doorway. "What was all that racket?" she said. She looked worried. "Maya, are you all right?" Maya tried to make a reassuring noise and more or less failed, but fortunately her mother had a phone in her hand and was distracted. "It's for you, dear," she said, and put the phone into Maya's still shaky hand. Said Maya. "Hello?" said the phone, while Maya's mother, who believed everyone deserved a little privacy, backed tactfully out of the room. "Maya, you there? Guess what?" "What?" said Maya. That was progress, a whole entire coherent word. "No more gargoyles," said Valco's voice, all delighted. "Of course my barometer's gone, too, but I really think—" "Escape," said Maya, sounding hollower than she meant to. "Excuse me, what?" "Fire escape," she said, putting some effort into it. "Did I just wake you up or something?" "There are gargoyles on the fire escape," she said, "right now, outside my window. Gargoyles." "No way," said Valco. "Really? Wait." There was a rustling sound on the other end of the line. "Okay, got my notebook," he said. "Go ahead, tell me. What do you see? They appeared when?" "What I see is my door," said Maya. "I told you, they're outside on the fire escape. I just saw them right now." "And they weren't there before that?" Oh, come on, said Maya. You know they weren't. Well, I haven't ever actually seen your fire escape, said Valco. But that's all right. I've got my pencil. Just describe them as carefully as you can. They're gargoyles. A whole crowd of gargoyles. I mean, what do they look like? They look like gargoyles. The voice on the phone sighed, and then became very, very patient. See, the reason I'm asking, said Valco's patient voice, is that I wonder whether these are the same gargoyles or different ones. Maybe somebody, all right, it's hard to imagine how, but never mind, picked the gargoyles off my window ledge and carried them over to your house. I mean, who knows, right? Maybe they're really made out of some kind of plaster that just looks like stone. I tried to get a sample last night, but I couldn't reach. Tried to get a sample? Echoed Maya. Yeah, like a little bit of an ear or a wing, said Valco. You know, with a hammer. But they were too far away from the window, so I just wrote down a really careful description. That's all I could do. So now you describe yours, and we'll find out if they match. But I can't even see them, said Maya. It's the kind of window you can't look through. I didn't see them until I opened it. Maybe you could even get that sample, said Valco. Was he listening to her at all? How close are they, actually? What do you mean, how close are they? They're on my fire escape. They're right outside. They are way, way, way too close. Valco cleared his throat. But in centimeters, he said. How far? Valco, said Maya. She kept her voice low, though, so as not to be worrying her mother out in the hall. I told you the window is shut and I'm inside. Huddled on the floor by her bed, actually, but she didn't add that information. And if you want to go climbing and measuring those things with a ruler, you can come over here yourself, she added. I can't, said Valco. He sounded genuinely disappointed about that. Today's all math problems, apparently. That was the backward way things worked in Valco's family. If you were good at something, you ended up having to suffer through tons of extra lessons. Open the window and look, Valco was saying now. Go ahead, they're just statues. They can't do anything to you. He had a point, right? Gargoyles are carved from stone. Even if they appear out of the blue on your fire escape, even if there's a whole crowd of them, that doesn't mean they aren't carved from stone. Maya stood up and opened the window and took a long, brave look. For one thing, there wasn't actually a whole crowd of gargoyles waiting out there. Only 2. That was a little embarrassing, but 2 unexpected gargoyles surely equal a crowd of other more normal animals like, squirrels. Each of them looked like a half-dozen different creatures somehow spliced together. The one closest to Maya, its stone gaze fixed on her in a most unsettling way, had an eagle's beak, the horns and beard of a goat, feathers that turned to scales halfway down its stone belly, and a pair of carved wings curving back from its bony granite shoulders. The other one, over there blocking the ladder down, had the crumpled-up nose of a bat and little round ears poking out from an elaborately bumpy skull, and in its froggy front paws it held something round and glinty. Ah, said Valco over the phone. Glinty, like made of brass? Round, like a clock, sort of? With numbers around the outside, and a needle? Yes, that pretty much described it. Only the whole thing was embedded thoroughly in the gargoyle's stone paw. Clever work on the sculptor's part, like a ship in a bottle, only stranger. Why did a gargoyle need to be hanging onto a clock, anyway? Not a clock, said Valco. That sounds like my barometer. Oh, said Maya. What even was a barometer? And they are the same gargoyles we had. One all bumpy-headed, right? So how did they get over there anyway? And my barometer, can you reach one of them? Said Maya, eyeing the fierce frozen gaze of gargoyle number 1. Sort of. What's it made of? Can you pick it up? I mean, is it secretly made of foam or something? Maya thought about it for a moment, and then stretched her non-telephone holding hand right out the window toward the hunched gray shoulder of gargoyle number 1, keeping a cautious eye on his stony beak. Okay now, okay, there you go, she found herself murmuring, as if she were about to pat a strange dog. "What?" said Valco's voice far away from the phone in her other hand. "What do you mean? What's okay?" It was just stone, right? Her hand already knew before it got there what that stone shoulder would feel like. Cold and grainy and maybe a little damp around the edges, just the way a stone gargoyle on a fire escape should feel early in the morning in October. But instead, twang! She had snatched her hand back before she realized what had just happened. No, not just snatched her hand back. She had pulled her arm inside, slammed the window shut, thrown the latch, and slipped, shaking, down to the floor. "What?" said an alarmed little voice from the phone. "What was that? You all right? Maya? Maya?" It was that feeling all over again. She couldn't figure it out. It didn't make sense. "Maya!" "They've come here for me," said Maya. Maybe Valco could hear her, maybe he couldn't. She didn't really have the energy to lift the phone up to her ear. "They recognize me. They know who I am. And what if there's a fire?" "Excuse me," said the phone. "Fire?" "There was a lovely thought for you. Fire on one side, gargoyles on the other." "No escape," said Maya. Even as she hung up the phone, though, something in her woke up, rebelled, and pulled her spine straight again. That was what that letter's gloating smudge wanted her to think, wasn't it? No escape. Well, she had news for all of them. Smudge, strangeness, gargoyles. It was going to take more than gargoyles on her fire escape to squash the spirit of Maya Davidson. Maya's mother had a saying she liked to use when life closed in on you and got a little frightening. Even when there's no way out, there's always a good way through. And now Maya knew where the path through was taking her. She had figured that out in the middle of the night. She would go through by being brave. She would go back to the salamander house to find another sheet of that horrible magical paper, and she would scrawl her own commands all over it, the perfect antidote letter, and that would be that. Just as well that Valco would be busy with his math. He had almost been sucked in by that doorway, hadn't he? Apparently, if you don't believe in magic, you are at extra special risk of falling right into every one of its traps. Perhaps because if you don't think it exists, your mind doesn't work very hard to resist. "It'll have to be me, resisting for both of us," thought Maya. And then she went out into the hall to get her coat and sneak off, since she had such a very, very good reason, to the last place anyone would have thought she would ever, ever, ever have wanted to be.